Welcome back to American Agenda.
I'm Allison Maloney along with Bob Sellers. We have some breaking news for you. Andrew Yang is running for New York City mayor. It is now official that the city campaign finance board confirmed that Yang registered his campaign with it on Wednesday. There's been speculation among people that he may throw his hat in for this race, but now it's officially confirmed. You may remember he was running for president for this election season, didn't make it, but yeah, a lot of people, a lot of Democrats are happy about that.
Yeah, I guess they want the Yang gang to turn out. We'll have to see, but I have a feeling we're going to hear a lot more about Andrew Yang over the next several months. So elsewhere, there's a growing number of congressmen and a few senators who say they will object to the election results on January 6th when Congress meets to certify the electoral vote. Usually a mundane affair. This year, it has taken on greater significance because some members of Congress say they are within their rights to object to how the vote was conducted. Joining us now, California Congressman Darrell Issa, newly elected, as I recall. You've been in these meetings before. I don't know if you were there in 2005 when some Democrats challenged the results, but how do you see this unfolding, and do you support this kind of action?
Well, I think that we have an eternity as far as the court system between now and then to get more information about the fraud that went on in a number of states. And I think that's going to start coalescing. You might remember in 2005, they didn't have anything except they didn't like the outcome of the election. In 2000, when the court had spoken, there was no debate because the court had spoken. People grumbled. They called President George W. Bush an appointed president. But at the end of the day, they recognized that the court had spoken. Our courts have not finished speaking. There's no question at all. They've turned away cases on technicalities that they should have considered on the merits. And so I think a lot of what my voters are looking for and voters around the country are looking for from their representatives is that we look at all this information and at least make a representative objection to the fact that there is a system that is broken. There's rampant fraud. My own state, our governor sent 5 million ballots out to people who didn't ask for them. And every single day I would get calls from people who had 2 and 3 ballots with similar names, but their name coming to them. They could have voted all 3 of them or 4 of them. They could have voted for their dead father or mother. And in fact, we know that in many cases people did. And that's over and above the fact that in California, approximately 2 million of those registered voters were illegal.
Explain to us, we don't have a lot of time, but what exactly will happen on January 6th?
Well, it's a pretty arcane procedure that essentially ratifies the electors. And if there are no objections from the states in which those electors come from, in other words, if every Secretary of State has essentially agreed to the outcome, then there's very little for us to object to. But as long as one state, whether it's Georgia or one of the others, Pennsylvania, any swing state, as long as there is a legitimate claim, either in the courts or by their officers, then in fact there's likely to be a member from that delegation who is going to use his vote to object.
And ultimately, this could come down to a vote on any particular state's electors. But everybody in the House votes, everybody in the Senate votes. And do you really think there are votes there to undo it, or do you think that's dependent upon evidence that is brought out at the time or up until then?
I think it's based on the evidence that comes out between now and then, the 2 hours that would occur if there's an objection, and some real soul searching by members of Congress. None of us want to see a constitutional challenge less than 2 weeks before the swearing in of a new president. But at the same time, all of us who have watched this election and have seen the rampant fraud, the inconsistencies, the bad systems like Dominion, we want to change. And so even if it is not successful relative to President Trump, it is very clear that there will be an outpouring of support for reforms that would lead to the American people having greater confidence in a system that right now many, many Americans no longer believe is fair or honest.
All right. Congressman, thank you so much
for joining us today. Have a Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
All right. Thank you. All right, let's bring back
our panel to discuss. Christina, I want to start with you. Do you think that there will be enough votes?
Do you mean enough votes to have the president-elect Joe Biden become president with his 306 electoral college votes? Yes, I do. I think that there's more than enough, and I think all of this is a way to continue to get more money from unsuspecting supporters to the Legal Defense Fund that has already made almost $250 million for the president with very little limitations on for how he can spend it. So this is all a ruse with no chance of it changing the impact.
But do you think that there's...
I look at polls, and a lot of Americans believe that there is distrust in our election process. And as far as what happened, do you think that anything needs to be fixed at all?
I think that several people within Trump's own administration, including the Attorney General and including the folks at Homeland Security, have said that this was the safest election in history, that there was no evidence of mass fraud. So I'm going to believe the people whose job it is to determine if there was fraud. I've also seen almost 50 cases go to courts around the United States, and all of them have been thrown out because of lack of evidence. So I'm going to take all of those empirical things and say to you that there is no fraud, and that I understand people do believe there is fraud because they keep hearing it on news channels that kind of regurgitate this misinformation, so that now that they believe it.
Okay, Adam, yeah.
So the courts haven't taken it up, as Christina mentioned. Do you think that there is any hope? Do you think we'll see anything different after January 6th?
I spent 10 years of my entire career working with the U.S. military, involved in some of the most complex investigations, and my background is in investigations and compliance. So I'll tell you that you have to go forward with the attorney mindset. Not that I'm practicing at all right at this point, but I'll tell you that the attorney mindset in neutral is that you get the evidence and the information that you gather through the investigations. And there's a tremendous amount of tools that we have at our disposal to gather the intelligence, to gather the evidence, and provide a report to the American people effectively that will argue a case. I was very interested in hopefully seeing Ted Cruz advocate. We didn't get that. But I'll tell you that the evidence does not lean in favor of the president at this current time. It's an enormous challenge for us to overturn any result, and I think it would also contribute to a decline in the system. But we're going to have a bit of a difficulty regardless of the outcome, and we're going to have to look at reform for a variety of different things for election security. I've been following CISA and DHS with the recent firings. So we've got a lot to talk about from a multitude of angles on this election reform effort, and it will not be an easy conversation, but I think conclusively it's going to be very difficult to turn the results from where they are right now.
Yeah, Brooke, do you agree with Adam on this?
Procedurally, absolutely, I do agree. I don't think the majority of Americans are an expert on what is going to happen next, but the bottom line is that the House and Senate both have to vote to consider the objection. And then my understanding is they have to both vote to overturn the results, and that's highly unlikely. However, that doesn't negate the fact that there has been a disturbing amount of fraud in this election, and to deny that, I think, is quite silly. And even if you disagree with how much fraud there has been, another undeniable fact is that a significant amount of the American public do not trust the system anymore. And that is a huge problem. And I don't think that what's going to happen.
Cut you off, but we're on a hard break. We'll get back to you with another segment. We appreciate it. All right, we'll be back with more American Agenda after this.